Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Hi, my name's Charlie, and I'm an alcoholic. And I want to thank my friend Shirali for asking me to speak here and trusting me enough to know that only half the crowd would... Is that better? Better? Okay. You may wish it was farther away later. Thank you for inviting me to do this. I really am honored, and I'm crabby, cranky tonight. I'm just in a bad mood. I've had a headache all day. I got shot out of the cannon this morning at oh yeah, pity me. But I'm I take it where I can get it. And it's just been a crazy day, just insane, breakneck day. And I loaded up my children to come here, and we had a nice 3.5 hour drive in the car. How far away is it? How long? How long is it going to be? How far are we now? Does it have a pool? I told my daughter we were camping out on the desert. We were going to the desert. We were going to camp in a tent and live out in the sand. And she was listening the whole time, just, wow, I don't know if I want to go. And but once I mentioned room service, she was on board. I'm wearing a long tie, and I favor bow ties, but my daughter gave me this for Father's Day. She couldn't wait till Sunday. She and my son came bolting in last night with ties for me, and so she said, "You have a purple shirt, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "Well, then you can wear it with that because it kind of changes colors if you move it." So I love it. It's great. So anyway. I'm cranky and ungrateful and full of crap as usual. I don't like the heat, and I don't like the sunlight, and I don't like coming to Palm Desert because I'm not like you. I won't be out sitting by the pool tomorrow because the sexual tension gives me hives. Go out there and watch people, polish their abs like they were detailing a car. I personally keep my clothes on as a public service. A few of you may want to take a lesson. I don't golf. I don't like sand. I like to sit in a room with a book and a big bowl of popcorn. And I'm just happier than a pig in a dumpster, I'll tell you. That's me. I know there's some well-worked out people here this weekend. I'm not one of them. I get padded jackets and leave it at that. I worked out once. This tells you a little bit about, I'm just sort of a prelude to what this is all about, because I worked out a few years ago. I worked out one time, and I was working at the studio, and they had a gym at the place. So I joined the gym because it was really reasonable if you worked at the studio. So I joined. I'm going to get not pumped up. I'm going to get just sinewy. You know what I mean? I'm going to get just enough to where people might think I was a dancer, but really straight. And so I went to the gym, and I wasn't there 5 minutes on the exercise bike, and the guy who played Superman in and the TV show that was on at the time came in and got on the bike next to me. I told somebody at work, I said, what a my first day there, and I get on the bike and Superman comes in and gets next to me. And she very delicately said, well, why would you be embarrassed? Do you think anybody was looking at you? They were all looking, and she was right. But the guy who showed me how to use the machine said, okay, here you do 5 of these, you do 10 of these, and then you do it twice. Okay, go around the machines, do what I've showed you how to do, and do it twice, and that'll be your workout for the day. Well, I went out, I did it twice, and I felt good. I didn't even feel tired. I didn't even feel the slightest bit worked out, to tell you the truth. So I went around and did it again. And then I did it one more time, almost halfway through, till I got a little tired, and I thought, these people really don't understand that I've got a lot of stamina, and I can do this. The next day when I woke up, this is not an exaggeration, I had to put my shirt on the floor and lay on my back and work my arm up into the sleeves. I have never felt so bad in my life. I couldn't hold a pencil and squeeze it without hurting. It was just insane. And so I haven't worked out again. It's bad for you. It's not good for you. So anyway, I'm up for coffee and sugar. That's about it. But I've never liked people, and it's not you, but them, that species that we call the human race. I just don't like them. I never have. I heard Cliff Roach talk one time and say he used to stand on the corner as a little kid and shake his fist at cars as they went by. And I thought, I get that. I just didn't do that. I thought about it, but people don't like you when you do that, and it was very important that people like me. And so I thought about it and then got resentful that I couldn't do it, because if I did it, they wouldn't like me. And since I didn't do it and they like me, who are they kidding? If they knew who I really was, they wouldn't. It's very complicated, but I think you understand. And I was always uncomfortable around people. I didn't want to be around. I thought that I couldn't understand how the human race got into a second generation based on its actions. It's just, and I'm getting a legion of followers now, but who are starting to see it my way. But at the time, I couldn't bear to be around other people. I was an only child. I enjoy being alone. I find great comfort in just being by myself. I'm not lonely. I'm fine. I'm lonely when I'm in a crowd full of people. That's when I feel my worst. And people, you go, well-meaning people, when you happen to casually mention that you might be a little bit lonely, they go, why don't you go out and meet some friends? Well, the last thing I want to do when I'm feeling lonely is be with people. Really. And I didn't understand that. It's a contradiction that I couldn't get. And I went through school with this just radiating potential, and planned to use it someday, but just not then. And it was like someone with one of those little friction cars, that you run on the ground when you're a little kid. This car is going to haul ass. When I finally let it go, it is going to take off. But I'm not going to let it go. Not today. But when I do, and that's how I spent my I had all these ideas of how I was going to, substitute the car for anything: career, relationships, being a man, being grown up, being smart, all those things. Not going to let it go. Not now. We're going to start here. Watch this. Not going to let it go. And I never did. And I tell the story because it really exemplifies. And I'll get to drinking, because I did in fact drink. But you got to understand, especially new people, that drinking is not really the problem. That's the problem. Because when I drink, it's nothing can keep me out of a car when I'm drinking. But I just was unhappy all the time, just constantly unhappy. I'd never heard the terms restless, irritable, and discontent in the same sentence till I came to AA, and it hit me in the forehead when I heard that, because that's how I always felt. That constant, and almost, because you get used to it after a while, it's almost an imperceptible sense of unease around everybody, and it all is focused on it's all self-absorption. It's constantly taking that thermometer reading everywhere, the emotional reading. What am I thinking? How do I feel? Aerial photographs, if you could, and all kinds of angles, and me, the magnificence of my life and where I am. But it was always self-critical. It was always negative, and since I can't bear to absorb the negativity all myself, I deflect it onto other people. They disappoint me. They don't like me. They're not like me. They're better than I am, and they're trying to lord it over me because I don't have any talents. I don't know how to do things. I don't understand how to do things. My parents, the God knows they tried. One time they bought me a piano. It was a shock. They asked me one time what I wanted. I think they were afraid I was going to turn into an assassin or something, because I got that real quiet age, and I was about 10, and in family pictures I was always the one standing in the back row, glowering, so they asked, what if you could play a musical instrument, what would you like to play? Now my father made about $600 a month as a carpenter at McDonnell Douglas. He worked there for 25 years, and he did not make a lot of money. And we had a house, we had money, food and stuff, but we didn't have anything. We were just on a thread as far as being able to keep up with things. And they said, if you could play an instrument, what would you like to play? And I thought for a second. I'd like to play the piano. Because I really would. I really wanted to be Van Cliburn or something. I wanted to play the piano, because I knew I wasn't gonna make my mark in the world running laps, if you guess what I mean. But or lifting weights. But that's anyway. So I said a piano, which deep down inside I knew that the likelihood of a piano arriving at that house was about as likely as the Mercury 7 spacecraft landing in our living room. So I just threw it out there, a piano. So about 2 weeks before Christmas, when I was around 10 years old, I came home, and there was a brand new Kohler Campbell piano sitting in my living room with a big bow on it. And my parents had gone out and bought this piano. They'd gone into Hawk to get this piano for me. And my first reaction was not, oh my God, what a loving thing to do. My first reaction was, I was pissed, because I didn't say I want to learn to play the piano. I just said I want to play the piano. I think the only place in the world where people really get that is in Alcoholics Anonymous. They wouldn't get it in Narcotics Anonymous because they just want to steal the piano. But I just didn't want to. I hope I didn't offend any of our NA members. I'm not trying to. But why are you here? Is the question. But because if you're looking for sex, drugs, and rock and roll, well, it's going to be a long night for you. But so I didn't want to sit down and learn how to do finger stretching exercises and play the piano. I just wanted to sit down, flip the key cover up, start to play, and have every woman in the room start panting, and every guy in the room would get really annoyed, and I would just play this lovely, haunting melody that I made up as I was going along. And then about halfway through it, I just shut the key cover and get up with my jacket over my shoulder and saunter over to the bar. Lean on the bar and watch the best-looking dame in the room just come slithering through the crowd and get right up next to me and hitch me up by the back of the pants and the lapel and go, I want you now. And I would say, no. Because I heard chicks dig it. But not that I have any experience at that. But I just never wanted to. I just wanted to have. I wanted the satisfaction of a job well done without having to do anything. And alcohol gave me that. That's when I turned 18, and I'm very late. I heard a guy yesterday, I swear to God, at a daytime meeting, was talking about having his first drunk at 4. At 4. I was way late for that. I was, I started 12 years after that guy did. But I don't think it matters when you start, and I don't think it matters when you quit, really. But I started at 18 because I thought I always had a suspicion of alcohol and drinking, and I didn't like it. My parents weren't drinkers. We had a death from alcoholism in our family, I believe. No one said it was. According to them, my Uncle Chet died of a broken foot. I'd heard that from my mother. I'm not. I swear. How did Chet die? He had complications from a broken foot. Apparently, his drinking aggravated a liver condition. The foot broke, and that took him out. But poor Chet. But there was my dad wasn't alcoholic. My mother wasn't alcoholic. They had a holiday bottle they'd bring out in mid-November, and they put the rest of it back in January. That kind of a bottle. Oh, we're getting kind of low. We've had it for 3 years. We should probably get another one just in case we run out this year. And there wasn't much drink in our house. My dad liked his beer and beer and baseball, and he'd been a drill instructor in the Marine Corps. I'm sure he was a sight disappointed in the issue of his loins, but I did the best I could. I was had asthma. I wheezed a lot, and I just was. I don't even want to go there. I missed a lot of school, but I was a good speller, which helped me with girls later. And but I went to this party because someone had asked me to go, and I wound up at this party, and I wasn't there 10 minutes, and I thought I've made a huge mistake being here because it's exactly what I thought it was. It was all people my age. It was 1968, the year that everybody's rhapsodizing about now. It was it was what it was. I just didn't feel a part of anything then. And I wasn't a hippie, and I wasn't a hawk. I was just a dork. And there I was at this party, and half the room is drunk, half of them are on acid. They all believe they're conversing at some level, some cosmic plane. And I'm standing there just thinking, why did I even come here? These are exactly the kind of people I hate. This is the kind of situation I should never allow myself to get into. I don't like to be put in a position like this where I have to make small talk, where I have to talk to a bunch of idiots, where I have to talk to people who talk in that really weird 60s patois that has sort of an accent to it that comes from nowhere. And they're all prancing around the room like they thought Joni Mitchell might if she were there, and it was awful, just awful. And they were all phonies. It was a phoniness, that skin deep, scratch them a little bit and you get primer underneath. And I just hated them. For every moment I was there, I was seething. And I came with a buddy of mine, and he was having a good time. And a guy came by and handed me a can of malt liquor. And I started to drink that can of malt liquor. About halfway through that can of malt liquor, it occurred to me that I'd been way too hard on you people. I began to feel different, comfortable, at ease, interested. The first time I'd ever really remember feeling, and I trust me, if you're new, no one who has ever spoken at an AA meeting as a main speaker ever had the feelings they're talking about in real time. I don't have, feelings come, understanding feelings come later. I had feelings, I just pushed them down. I didn't know what they were. I never recognized a feeling until I got to Alcoholics Anonymous and could never categorize it. But what happened, the reason I know what happened to me that night is because I've been coming to AA for years, and because I've been active in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've done the steps, I work with a sponsor, and more importantly, I listen to other people's stories and listen to them carefully and relate to the things that I can relate to with them. And start to understand what happened to me because of relating. We're nothing but our stories, really, to each other. That's all we have, is our experience from our stories. And so I was standing there feeling different. I mean, really, for the first time, I wasn't absorbed with what I thought everybody was thinking about me. I wasn't feeling like I had my refractory lens out looking in. I was able, for some reason, I don't know why, alcohol that had that effect on me. Turned everything around, and I became interested in the way you acted, and interested in looking at you and watching you. And I started to feel connected in some way. Now, the bad news, now that seems like good news. That you would think that a guy who was sort of jockeying for assassin, who would get some solution where he would have a few drinks and all of a sudden feel comfortable for a change, and feel like I felt like I thought I should feel all the time. When I drank that first time, I thought inside, and I remember this consciously, I thought, this is the way I am supposed to feel. This is the way they feel all the time. I don't feel like this all the time, but I feel sensational now. I feel I feel my potential just percolating in there. I feel alive for the first time, really. I felt just overjoyed. And I went into a blackout after that, and wound up running alongside of my friend John's car. He wanted to leave at that point. I'm running alongside the car, barfing on myself and just laughing my ass off because I'd been to the mountaintop, And I had tried to think my way into feeling better about things, and it was always a disaster. I always wound up hating people even more. And after that, I felt like I'd been liberated. I'd been just freed from something. I didn't know what it was. And I drank like that for the next 12 years. I drank in blackouts. I drank in brownouts. I drank, I don't have a big, terrible cudgel of a story, I don't have a high bottom either. I damaged myself enough to where I had to get here. I had to do something. I was, I've heard a lot of AA talks. I've heard a lot of people, coming out of blackouts saying, cut the red wire, if you know what I mean. I've never had that experience. I've never come out of a blackout going, cover me, I'm going in. I've come out of blackouts with people saying stuff to me like, boy, I bet that hurt. Or things like, did you mean to do that? Or you better leave, she's going to call somebody, And that's how I drank. I love to drink, but then after a while, the old... I was working I wanted to be a writer, and I was working at a receiving dock in a bookstore. I figured that was close, and I'd get there. I'd jump the hedge pretty soon and be a full-fledged writer. I had a tweed jacket, corduroy pants, and an Oxford shirt. I was halfway home. I had the biggest crevice to jump was actually having written something, but I was on my way to do that, and I was at this job. I was going to take it as a stepping stone job. I was there for 12 years, and I did about every shameful thing I've heard. I've heard a lot of people talk about shameful stuff that they've done in meetings, and I've heard a lot of people talk about things that hurt them and hurt other people, and I am one of them. I'm not going to go into a long, inventory type talk here, but we just do things that bring us shame, and it's hard to accommodate shame when you're insecure anyway, and you're physically sick, and you're trying to keep medicated enough. And I tried a lot of other things. I joke about drugs, but I took drugs, and they got me loaded. And I didn't want. I guess that's the point. But I didn't want to be. I realized later I didn't want to be loaded. I want to be there, right in the middle of it. I felt. I hear, and I mean no disrespect either, but I hear people say sometimes that they took drugs because they wanted to get away from the world and get away from things. And I drank because I needed to get into the world. That was my entree into real living. And I felt alienated from the world sober. When I drank is when I felt like I was part of something and I was there. I was in the moment. And that's all I wanted. I smoked pot a few times. How many times in a row can you listen to Layla before you're in the kitchen at 3 a.m. eating bouillon cubes, Anybody want a ketchup packet? took speed for a while. Did not like the sensation of my eyes trying to beat me into the next room. Let's go, man. Just one night I smoked, well, a couple of nights, I smoked some PCP with a friend just to be polite, and realized at that point that I don't need to induce psychosis. Me on PCP is redundant. For someone like me to drop acid is just overkill. If I want to start tripping, I just stop drinking and start thinking. And pretty soon I'm polishing small bomb parts in a tar paper shack in Montana, you know. Just me and Cooter out there. The only thing that's different from me and Johnny and from me and my friend Paul or from Don Ann or the people that I know who have some really difficult roads that they've gone down is the fact that I just never pulled the trigger on it because of fear. You know, I was always terrified to do something that might bring some shame to my family, and yet I did it anyway. You know, I always wound up doing it, but I didn't want to do that. And I wound up on the. I was married the first time. It's really getting confusing now, but and she was not alcoholic, and she tried to drink with me a few times and had to quit because she was losing control, which I believe that she was just a quitter, and she loved me. She really did. And I was not a husband. I was not a husband at all. I was nasty and, just untrustworthy and a cheater and not a good man around her. And I had no idea how to be a husband. As far as I find out now, it means that you're supposed to be a participant in the relationship. Oh, wow. Really? Because I thought I was there to just be there and have someone to lean on, every so often, and when I needed things. And she wanted a divorce. I tried going to therapy for her. She suggested I go to therapy because I was telling her I was having dreams about going out and drinking with dead people, and I told her I was having a better time with them than I was with her. And 30 years later, maybe, but I was going to therapy, and it wasn't working because I couldn't get therapy to work on my alcoholism because I didn't know I had alcoholism. And another thing was that the prerequisite for therapy is the truth. And if you are alcoholic, you haven't got a clue what the truth is, not even a whiff of what the truth is. I put up such a scaffolding of lies and deception around myself about what the truth was that I couldn't. It wasn't that I was being deceptive. I just couldn't recognize it anymore. I couldn't see what it was all self-preservation at that point. George Orwell in an essay said that a tyrant wears a mask and his face grows to fit it. And I think an alcoholic does too. We walk out there with that mask before we start drinking, trying to make people buy this so they don't look at this. I want them to look at this and think I'm this way or that way or funny or charming or kind or whatever. And I put the mask out there, and I know it's a lie. I feel uncomfortable, and I resent them for even making me have to put it out there. And then I drink. And what alcohol does for me is it fills the gap between right here and the back of that mask. And I believe with everything in me that what I'm holding out there, this is the real me. This is me. And then over the years, the alcohol ceases to fill the gap, and it pulls back and pulls back and pulls back until on the 11th of June of 1981, I was holding that mask out there for everything I had, and I was as drunk as I've ever been in my life. And I couldn't hold it anymore. I just could not hold the thing up. And I fell apart, just kind of came undone. I'd been peeing blood for weeks. I'd been, in the hospital, in and out of the hospital. I never stayed, so I wasn't alcoholic. They say, have you ever been hospitalized? Well, no, I never got admitted. I'd get into the emergency room for about 7 hours, and they, pump my stomach, or else, what I think they did it just to be cruel. They gave me big liters of water to drink, so I'd lay there on the table, and every 20 minutes it'd be like Old Faithful, just this big geyser would come up, and then they'd give me Valium, because I was stressed. They asked me, they said, have you ever heard of Valium? Well, I think I have. Do you have a lot of stress at work? Oh, you have no idea. I see one of those trucks coming down that driveway, and I just immediately feel stress. And so I got Valium. I took that stuff. I sat around. I only took it for a year. I had to take it like 10 milligrams 4 times a day, or every 4 hours or something. And it was just the eternal sigh. That's all I did for days. Just go. People say, what's wrong, Charlie? And I think, nothing. Nothing. I don't want to be free of conflict. Conflict gives me a reason to live, and, but I just wound up at that meditation. I went to a meditation retreat with the person who was my counselor, and I wound up having a moment of clarity there, where I felt like I wanted to die. I just wanted to kill myself. I didn't plan on it, but when I got there, I hadn't had a drink for about 12 hours, and they didn't have any alcohol there, and I thought they would. And I was shocked. Well, it was at a Catholic retreat house. You'd think they'd have at least some sacramental wine, So it's been blessed. I can drink that, but they didn't have anything. And I started to detox on this meditation retreat. They had stacked parking, and my car was in the middle. I got there the first, and I was stuck. No alcohol for the first time for a long, long time. And I started to really have a bad time. And I wound up going out on the meditation grounds on the direction of this retreat master or mistress. And she said, I want you to think about your life and where your life's going to be in the next 5 years. I thought, I'll tell you something easier. Why don't I put my face right down by the bumper of your car and you floor it? Because I can tell where my life's going to be in the next 5 years. I had a guided meditation that morning where I saw myself hanging from the bathroom door of my house. Not my house, my mother's house. That was there. That really draws the babes in. And nothing like a 30-year-old guy living in his mom's house. And I had enough furniture just to fill one room. And but I wanted to die. I wanted to not to die in a dramatic way or have all this, not writing the selection of music I want at my funeral and all that stuff like I usually did. But I wanted to just be lifted right out of this world and taken away. I just couldn't figure out what it was that's necessary to be a real human being in the world. And alcohol wasn't working anymore. And you certainly weren't working anymore. And you had disappointed me, and you had frustrated me, and you had looked at me funny way too many times for me to ever want to feel like I could possibly fit in the middle of this crap hole that you people seem comfortable in. I don't want any part of it, and I wish I could just die. And at the moment, I had really convinced myself that that was the way I wanted to go, what I wanted to do. I felt absolutely and unqualified the sense of love that went from right down to the base of my soul. I felt completely loved for about 30 seconds. And I didn't know what that was. It just stuck me in my tracks. Because I thought, I want to die, and now I'm feeling like I'm loved. Where does that come from? And I thought I was losing my mind. And I believe that was my higher power. And I believe that at that moment I hadn't said, God help me, and I hadn't made any kind of prayer or anything. All I'd said was, I just wish I could die and just be gone. And I felt this sense inside that said, you're all the things that you think you are and all the things that you're afraid of, and I still love you. And then it just went away. The feeling went away, and there I was standing there holding this, emotional bag, I thought, what now? And I talked to my sponsor about it later after I did an inventory, and he said, what happened was you, for the first time, you gave up. You surrendered completely. It wasn't surrendering to something positive. It was surrendering to dying. But at least you dropped everything so that God could get out and play. He could come out and tell you that He was there. I used to teach a writing class in college when I was teaching. I started teaching when I was about 4 years sober. I went back to grad school, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself. But I was teaching an essay writing class, and I was teaching about how to write a how-to essay. And the example I used was from an essay about a guy wrote about how to open an oyster. I think it was an oyster, either an oyster or a clam. And you have to run an experienced fisherman has to run their knife point along the edge of the clam. You can pull on that thing all you want, and it won't open. That sucker is held tight. It's solid muscle. You can't pry it open. But if you take the point of the knife and you just run it along the edge, what happens is that little guy's got to breathe. And he'll open a little teeny air hole to let some air in. And that's called the purchase point. And the experienced fisherman can just run the knife point along and find the purchase point and slip the knife into that purchase point and open it up, and has no resistance. It can't fight it. You know? And I believe that's exactly what happened to me that day. When I dropped everything, I opened that little tiny air hole, and I got flayed wide open for 30 seconds until I had the awareness that I had been flayed wide open and managed to slam that thing shut again. You know? But it changed me enough to think that maybe there was something that was going to happen. And about a week later, I got brought to an AA meeting by a woman with 22 days of sobriety. She 12-stepped me. She was my sister-in-law. Her husband had died of alcoholism, had drowned at age 25, and she had a 5-year-old daughter. And she had gone to a rehab in Orange and had gotten out the day before and needed a ride to an AA meeting. And she asked me if I'd give her a ride. And I just stopped drinking about 4 or 5 days before. I was a little weird. Quick, I think is how you describe it. I kept hearing people in the backseat of my car talking to me. I was having imaginary gnats in my peripheral vision that you can't get rid of. Nobody will tell you that they're there either, so I would swat them away all the time. And I was, at work, people just, I look like a cat trying to clean himself, it was just constantly. And I took her to the meeting, and I was going to drop her. I pulled up. I told her I'd quit drinking, and good for her. I'm glad she's gone to detox and she's going to quit drinking. And I pulled up at the curb and said, "When do you want me to come back and get you?" And she said, "Well, why don't you come into the meeting?" And I said, "Well, I'm not an alcoholic, really." And you know what? She was really, I don't know, I don't think she thought of it. I think it was just something that happens that is so lucky for those of us who get the message from somebody. She said, "That's okay, you don't have to be an alcoholic, it's an open meeting. But since you quit drinking this week, maybe if you come in and listen, you might hear something that'll help you." And that seemed logical to me, So I went into the meeting, didn't like it, loserama. Wow. People hobbling around and talking in parables and talking about, Him who presides over us all and Him. And it was, I thought, this is really great for you, but it won't work for me because I'm not dumb enough to believe all this stuff. I believed in God. I knew there was a God. I just didn't believe He had anything to do with me. And how could I believe in a God? Don't you get? I get mad at God even now. Just when I think that George Harrison's dead and Wayne Newton's still around, let's see, Joe Strummer or Michael Bolton. So I have trouble reconciling things sometimes, but everybody talked about this God and this higher power and all this woogie-boogie stuff that I couldn't get into. But something happened to me at that meeting that I try to do today, and I think it's the most important thing, and I think anybody in this room will concur that the most important thing I can do at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting is to look for the person with the wiggy eyes and let them know that they're welcome here. Because people came up to me and they didn't say, you know what you have to do, son? You know what you really need to do? You know what I think you should do? What they did was they just came up and said, you're new, aren't you? And why don't you get a cup of coffee? You got any literature? Do you know what this program's about? Let me come up here to the table. They did that. I was fighting it the whole time. I didn't want to get literature. I don't know. I've been, I had dinner with the Moonies one time. I don't need to be, I know what you're up to. But they got me a big book and they got me a meeting directory and said, you're welcome back here. We hope you come back. We'd like to see you. And I came back the next week and I hadn't drunk that week. I'd been drunk that week. And I went to that meeting. I got there at 7. It was an 8 o'clock meeting. I got there, I think, at 4:30. And because I had a little bit of bourbon at home and I didn't want to drink it. And it was a beautiful June day. And I came to that meeting. It was a Sunday afternoon. I came in there. It was in Tustin, California, on Sunday night. And there were 2 guys in there at 4:30. Just, again, lucky as could be. 2 guys in there making coffee for the meeting. And one guy's name was Doc, and he had 10 years sober. And the other guy's name was Frank, and he had 1 year sober. And I was standing at the door, and they said, are you looking for somebody? And I said, well, yeah, I was looking for some people who were here last week. And they said, oh, you mean the AA meeting? And I thought, geez, I said, there's a janitor right over there, for crying out loud. He's going to think I'm an alcoholic or something, So I put on, I readjusted my sunglasses and my Sherlock Holmes hat, and they were just kind to me. These guys said, "Are you an alcoholic?" And I said, "I really don't think so. I don't think so." And he goes, "Well, why are you here?" And I said, "I got some bourbon at home, and I just really don't. I'm just trying to change. I don't want to drink it. I just don't want to drink it." And the guy named Doc said, "Do you mind if I ask you a friendly question?" And I said, "Sure, go ahead." And he said, "Do you think many non-alcoholic social drinkers come to an AA meeting 4 hours early because they're afraid, on a beautiful sunny day, because they're afraid because they got some bourbon at home?" I really hate that kind of question. But I had to admit, possibly not, possibly not. And so he said, well, why don't you were here last week, could you set the chairs up for us the way they were? Frank and I are going to finish making the coffee, and then let's go out and get something to eat. They didn't even know me. Piled in the guy's car, we drove to a Winchell's donut shop and got a couple of donuts and some coffee, and they sat there and talked to me for about an hour. And they didn't talk to me about what I should do or what was going to happen to me and this and that. All they talked about was, went to a meeting last week, heard something interesting there, drove out and talked at a meeting over here. And this guy, Doc, said he drove 60 miles to a meeting, and there was one guy at the meeting. One guy. And I sat there, I was shocked. I said, "You must have been furious." And he said, "No, it was one of the best meetings I've ever been to." He said, "It was just me and this other guy. It was worth it." He said, "I was a little upset when I first got there, but it was great. We had a good time. We had a good meeting. And what happened was supposed to happen. It was one of us talking to another one of us, and we both stayed sober that night, and we left. We left sober." And I thought, well, that's not a very good payoff as far as I can see it, but whatever floats your boat. And I wound up getting sent to there was a speaker named Keith Carpenter who spoke at that meeting about first big speaker I heard was Chuck C. And boy, you would have thought the Dalai Lama was coming to that meeting. It was a hush in the room. Chuck C's gonna be here. Chuck's here. And I thought, some regional celebrity. Who's Chuck C? What kind of corn pone thing is this? And Chuck spoke that night, and everybody loved him. I didn't understand, though. My level of experience did not meet up with his level of experience, and so I was baffled by him. But what got to me was that other people seemed to really enjoy listening to him. And then they told me to go thank him when it was over. Let's go up and thank Chuck. I said, "Thank Chuck for what?" I'm not a stupid guy, and I didn't understand a word that man said. What the hell is a bleeding deacon? You know? His math is all wrong. He said, half measures avail you nothing. You'd think that half measures would avail you half. That was one of Chuck's lines. You'd think you get half out of half measures, but you get nothing. And I thought, wow, this is deep. So I go up to thank him, and they're kind of pushing me in a line. I don't want to displease anybody. I go up there, and I'm kind of, hi, I'm Charlie, and he says, how long you sober, boy? And I said, about 20 days. And he goes, God, I love you. And he grabbed me and he kissed me. Shocked me. And I contend that that's where I caught alcoholism. Chuck Chamberlain was a carrier. And so be careful, folks, especially this weekend, if you know what I mean. But I heard Keith speak at that meeting, and went up to thank him because I was told to go up and thank him. And again, Keith's looking at me. How long are you sober? And I told him, and he was real nice about it. He goes, well, how many meetings you go to? And I said, I go to 4. And he goes, well, you should be going to 7. And I said, well, I think 4 a month is satisfactory. I mean, I go to 1 every week. And he said, 4 a month? I'm talking about 7 days a week. And I said, that's excessive. And he said, how often did you drink? And I said, that's none of your business. I didn't exactly say that, but I thought it. And so he said, here's a meeting I want you to meet me at. Where do you work? Because I told him it was too far. I gave him the whole, I work in Santa Monica and I live in Anaheim. And when I leave Santa Monica, it's about an hour and a half home. I don't get to leave sometimes at 6 o'clock. I get stuck in traffic. By the time I get back to Anaheim, it's 8:15 and it's too late to get to a meeting. And so he goes, why don't you go to a meeting closer to where you work? Okay. Where do you suggest? Where is one by where I work? So he gave me the address of the synagogue on Sunset Boulevard. I go there, and I had no idea what I was in for there. And I was amazed. And I got in there at 8:29. I started at 8:30 at the time. I got in there at 8:29. I was out of there at Amen. Boy, I just booked. And still had cards trailing behind me, And so the next night, the guy, somebody there I looked for Keith, and he was there. He was hard to miss. And so he said, there's another meeting on Thursday night over at the bank over here in Santa Monica. Maybe I'll see you there. So I had nothing to do that night, and I went over to the bank. And I met a couple of guys there. And then they asked me to go to a watch with them. And they started bringing me along with things. And people started to remember my name. And they started to ask me if I had a sponsor, which was a preposterous question, because I said, what do I need a sponsor? And they said, what do I need a sponsor for? They said, well, he'll take you through the big book. And I thought, well, I need someone to walk me through this important metaphysical text. I've got a degree in journalism and a minor in English. I've parsed some of the finest poetry in the English language. I don't think I'm going to be too confused with G-Ma, ain't it grand, the wind stopped blowing. I don't know that I'm going to need a handler to help me get through King Alcohol and the denizens of his mad realm. Woogie boogie boogie. If that's what a sponsor is for, I'll leave that to you simple folk. I can do this myself. But I got a sponsor because I wanted you to shut up. And I got a sponsor, and this guy walked me through everything. I'm talking to the converted here already. Get commitments. Shake people's hands. Stop looking at their shoes and look them in the eye when you shake their hand. Ask them their name. And I would go around meetings just like I was like an automaton. Hi, I'm Charlie. Hi, I'm Charlie. Hi, I'm Charlie. The person would go, I know I just met you about 3 people ago. But no one ever said, "Hey, I already shook your hand. Back off." You get one shake and one hello. That's all I got. No one ever said that. And then after a couple of times doing that at a couple of different meetings, people would come up and go, "Hi, Charlie." And I was impressed that anybody knew my name. I mean, I was that insecure that the fact that somebody at an AA meeting who knew my name, it made me feel good. It made me feel different. It made me feel part of something that I hadn't felt a part of at all. And I wound up doing I was told to shake speakers' hands all the time, no matter whether you like them or not, and shake participants' hands. Anybody who participates in the meeting, go up and thank them. Just shake their hand. Ask them their name. I did a lot of handshaking. He said, "You're not allowed to sit down before the meeting. You get your butt out of the chair and you walk around and talk to people. You can only sit down when you hear the gavel hit. And you don't leave a meeting before, keep coming back. Then you can leave the meeting after that. But you don't leave before then, under any circumstances." And I was, because I was desperate. And I didn't even realize how desperate I was. But I did all the stuff that he told me. And funny, it didn't work. I kept thinking, it's not working. I haven't had a glorious spiritual awakening, sunshine and all that stuff. I was just doing the deal. I was mopping floors and dumping trays of coffee grounds and, folding cords for the sound guy and being the literature mule at my Wednesday night meeting. And yet it wasn't working. The program was not working. I was 8 months sober and it didn't take. I'm waiting I need a spiritual awakening. And I would hear people all the time come up to the podium and go, "My name's Josephine, and I haven't been to a meeting in 7 months, but I came back today and I had a spiritual awakening." I thought, holy crap, I've been coming here for 7 months, 8 months, mopping the floors, dumping the coffee grounds. I haven't had a spiritual awakening yet. How does that happen? She comes back one day and has a spiritual awakening. That's not fair. Not to mention Wayne Newton. This is not right. And this is an example of why religion doesn't work. And I would just go off on my whole, and Bill just said, I said, "When is it going to happen?" He said, "I don't know. It'll happen. Just shut up and go to the meeting. I'm not going to talk to you about it. How do I know when it's going to happen? I'm not a psychic." So I kept doing the deal. And at 8.5 months sober, I'm miserably mopping the floor at Ohio Street. We had a crack team of losers who are all of us are still sober. But we're mopping the floor at Ohio Street, and there's about 125 people lined up to thank the speaker. And I paused for a second, and I looked at them, and as my eyes went across their faces while they were standing there, I wasn't even thinking. I'm just looking at these people, just like I'm looking at you right now, and it occurred to me right down in here that I knew every single one of you by name, and I liked you. I liked you. Because of all the stuff that people had been giving to me, and I didn't even know I was getting it. I used to go to Clancy's yard and play softball, which was really a challenge because I'm left-handed, I can't catch, and I'm lousy at it, and I'm wearing a right-handed glove for 3 weeks. I'd have to take the glove off to throw the ball, and here's my friend Duke here tonight, and Duke is a left-hander, and he was a ball player, and he showed up about the second week after he saw me doing that, and he goes, "Come here, here's a glove for you, it's a lefty." And he gave me my first left-handed glove so I could play the game better. And I kept that glove for years and years and years. And, people did little acts of kindness to me that leaked in somewhere, kind of soaked in around the edges, and I got it. And I started making changes in my life. I went back to school and I became a teacher, and I stayed single for 17 years in AA, and fell in love and got married, and had 2 children who are here tonight, who are just the sweetest kids in the world. And, the last few years have been really kind of a difficult time. Not that I'm complaining and not that I'm having such a challenge, but I'll tell you, I've been through my mother's death, a divorce, a really bitter divorce, and which confused my children and confused, the whole situation was kind of confusing. And this year has been, in the last year, Clint Hodges, who was a good friend, died, and VINCI, who was another good friend, died. And then the thing that just made me feel like I don't know what is happening, but something bad is really happening here. The day after Vince died, my sponsor called me and told me that he'd gotten drunk that day, and he was almost 33 years sober. And and was begging me not to throw him out on the phone. This is a guy who saved my life and showed me how to live my life, showed me how to tie a bow tie, showed me how to treat people, how to act, how to be active in meetings. Johnny used to say all the time that every meeting he ever went to on the west side, Bill was there. But he stopped doing the deal, and he drank. And it scared the hell out of me. And just last week, another good friend of mine died. And not that that makes me a victim of anything, but because it didn't happen to me. And we've had a catastrophe in our family, and I'm a single dad now, full time. And I don't know how to do it, but I'm making it up as I go along. And I have a lot of single dads in AA that I get some direction from, and sometimes I get direction from them by just watching them. Just watching how they interact with their children or what they talk about, and try to mimic that, because that's how I've learned how to do things around here, is to mimic people. And my life has started changing. I got laid off of my job 2 years ago after being there for 16 years. And I didn't feel bitter at all. When it was over, it was just over. I was upset, and I didn't want to lose my job, but I started my own business. And now I'm a freelance writer, and I have a new sponsor. I got a new sponsor within about 5 minutes after that phone call. And he's been giving me direction, and I've been staying solvent. I'm making my bills, and I'm supporting my family, and I've not done any of it by myself, not a single jot of it by myself. And it's hard to get to meetings at night. I go to my daytime meetings, and there are great people at my daytime meetings, and they've welcomed me there, and I'm a regular part of these meetings that I go to during the day. But I know my home is here, and I know my home is with the people who made me feel like they had brought me into their home and gave this to me. And I'll tell you a story, and I'll sit down. I tell the story. Bob Fuca, who was an old Marine Corps guy in my group, died a couple of years ago, and he sent me an email about 3 days before he died, and he said, "Never stop telling that story about your father when you talk." And so my dad was a Marine. He was a drill instructor for 8 years. He was in the China Marines. And so, like I said, I'm sure he was somewhat disappointed in his non-athletic, non-Marine Corps quality son. I knew that. I could sense that. He didn't have to say anything to me. I could tell by looking at him. I knew what I was. I was a wheezing, scrawny little nothing. And here's this guy who had been in the Marines. I'm sure, he and my mom, they had 3 other babies that all died at birth. And I was the one that survived. And I felt that was unjust. I always felt like, why me? How come the other ones didn't make it, And I'm not the one that should be around. I always felt guilty about that. It's all that self-absorbed, self-pity crap. And so I knew my father had been disappointed, and that kept me at arm's length from him for a long, long time. And he used to get up every day between the time I was about in the 7th grade to the 10th grade, and he would make lunch for me. And my parents, like I said, didn't have much in the way of finances, and so I had to carry my lunch to school. So he'd make a sandwich and put stuff in the lunch bag, the best he could, and write my name on the bag and set it by the door, and go off to McDonnell Douglas in his squishy-soled shoes and his sawdust-covered glasses. And I would get up in the morning, and I'd walk out there, and I'd grab that lunch, and I wasn't grateful for that lunch. I wasn't grateful for anything. I walked out of that house thinking about what I didn't have, and I walked to that school, and as I crossed the property line, I just dropped my lunch in the trash and just kept moving, because cool kids don't carry their lunch to school. Losers do, and I'm not going to be looked at. I don't need one more piece of evidence, to wave around. Look, here I am, loser. Take your shot now. I just threw it away, and I did that for years. And I didn't realize while I was doing it that every time I did it, it tightened something inside of me between my father and me, and I didn't know it. But every time I looked at that guy, I couldn't look him in the eye, and it wasn't conscious. I just did it, and so it came out of my inventory, because I felt guilty about it. Even years later, after I got sober, I knew I'd been a disappointment to my father, as I told him, and it came out in my inventory, and I couldn't make amends to him because he died when I was 22. So Bill gave me some directions to make amends to him, and I went, and it took me 10 years to go back and make amends to my father at his grave. But it wasn't a big dramatic thing either. I just went there and talked to him like people had told me. Like Clint Hodges had talked about making amends to his mother at her grave. I followed what he said exactly. I mean, to the letter. and I got a different result, and I felt like something had happened, and I didn't, nothing happened that day, but months later, I felt like my father hadn't at all been disappointed in me. I don't know why, but someone was talking to me about my dad, and I realized inside he hadn't been disappointed in me at all. And so I went to my mom, emboldened by this, and sat her down and was making amends to her about what I had done. And I said, you know what, when I was a kid, Dad used to make lunch for me every day, and I used to throw it in the trash. And she said, I know. And I said, how do you know? And she said, well, your dad told me. And I said, how did he know? She said, every so often, every couple of months, he'd ask you how your lunch was that day, and you'd always give him the wrong answer because you hadn't eaten it. And I said, well, what, if he knew I was throwing it away, why did he keep making it for me? And my mom didn't say a word. She kind of looked at me across the table. And I got it. It was just pure love. Pure love. It was just, he didn't care what the results were. He didn't care what he got back from it. He just got up in the morning and made lunch for his son. My mom said, your father, the day you were born, got a bottle of bourbon and about 4 glasses and went up and down the street in the neighborhood knocking on people's doors saying, I just had a son, let's have a drink. Just a celebration. She said he was never disappointed in you. He was overjoyed about you. I thought, wow, I really blew that one, I did everything I could to separate myself from him so I wouldn't have to feel his disappointment. And it was my own disappointment. And all the time, my father was getting up and making lunch for me and just, he knew I was throwing it away, but that wasn't why he did it. That's not the reason why people came here tonight and set up chairs or put this conference together or made coffee down here or put together the program and put those baskets in the speakers' rooms or, made it comfortable for us to come here and be amongst friends. All the people who put this together didn't do it because they were going to get a pat on the head or get marched out and given a medal. They did it because they just know that's the right thing to do. And it's an act of love. Love has nothing to do with emotions. Love has to do with being responsible. Love has to do with being, from my perspective, being a man. Stepping up and being a man. Do what's right and what's expected of you, and just do it. And my father showed me that, and I missed it. I missed it. You showed it to me. I got it when my mother looked at me. I got exactly what happened because everybody in here has been showing me acts of love and asking for nothing in return from me. I can tell you something. I could live to be 300 years old, and I hope I do, and I hope you're with me. But I'll never be able to pay this gift back. Never be able to give it back. And so I take it tonight, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm sharing it with my children, and I hope I shared it with you. And thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. If that shows up, the gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.